Our speakers tonight are David Hawks and Eric Cussen. They are here from Agile Velocity, and full disclosure, he's my boss. So we're really excited to have him here to talk about how do you know if you're ready for an Agile transformation? How do you get started? I'll let you introduce yourselves in more detail, David and Eric.
All right, thanks, Sally. So yeah, we've got a session here prepared. We get this question a lot around what do I need to do to prepare? Are we ready? When's the right time? All these kinds of questions. So we wanted to kind of put a talk together around that. I'll let Eric introduce himself first.
Hello, everybody. Good evening and good morning to those in India. I'm Eric Cussen. I am in Golden, Colorado, and have been working with Agile Velocity for a while, and been doing Agile transformation since like 2006, and all kinds of different companies, different sizes, different types, everything from small tech startups to big insurance, healthcare, financial services, etc. So I've been doing this for a while, and looking forward to having conversations about it with all of you tonight and how to help either your company, or if you're thinking about it, or if you are coaching and need some extra insights into kind of how to answer some of these questions for your clients. Hopefully we can help.
That's me. All right. And I'm David Hawks. Founded Agile Velocity about 10 years ago. I'm based down in Austin, Texas. I see another Austinite on the call there. And my background, so I'm a certified enterprise coach, certified Scrum trainer, which means that I not only train stuff, but spend a lot of time coaching. And most of my time is spent helping with transformation strategy. So working with senior leaders and leaders around, all right, how do we approach this? How do we navigate? And along the way, in the 11 years of doing Agile coaching and training, we invented the Path to Agility framework, which is being used across the country, actually across the world, to help folks navigate these crazy Agile transformation journeys. So we'll share a little bit about how you can leverage some of that framework as well in the stuff that you do. And we've got a couple Path to Agility facilitators. Ben is a Path to Agility facilitator as well on the call today. And Agile Velocity, just so you kind of get a sense of where we come from, we definitely approach things a little differently in that we're not there's so many coaching is a overused. Agile coaching is a kind of ambiguous term, and there's a lot of companies out there that say they do coaching, but I would say they're more staff aug or coaching augmentation companies than they are truly transformation companies. And our focus is really helping partner with organizations around Agile transformation. That's all we do, is help organizations around Agile transformation, training, coaching. And really, at the end of the day, we measure success on, are we able to work ourselves out of a job, right? That's what a successful coach should be doing. So we're going to share a little bit about that approach and that philosophy today. We are going to use a little bit of polling throughout. And so if you want to navigate, and maybe somebody, Eric or somebody, can post that link to the chat. So it's an easy link, but that'll come up here in a second. And then we've got something at the end as well. So just FYI, that'll come up here in a couple slides. So we gathered kind of 7 top questions that we see, and these are the 7 that we're going to run through today. Again, from when's the right time, who should be involved, who's impacted, who's leading it, where to start, all those kind of things. And so we're going to run through these one by one. First one is why transform, and the idea here is it's important to get a North Star about the why. A lot of times we go into organizations, we ask leaders like, why are you doing this Agile transformation? And they say to be Agile. It's like, all right, that's not an outcome. That's not the goal, right? That's a how, right? Like, you're doing Agile, being Agile, like that's a solution. what is the why? We need to get clear about the why because we need to motivate people. We need to compel people into action. And if we can't create a sense of urgency around that, we're not going to get there. This is too hard. This is really hard work. And if we just, nobody's going to be motivated by our goal is to implement safe, right? Nobody cares. Our goal is to do better process. Nobody cares, right? Like people aren't going to be motivated by that. So at the end of the day, we need to get clear about what's the outcome that we're after. And in Path to Agility, we outlined that there's kind of these 9 key business outcomes that we see over and over again that organizations kind of can key into. And so we often will do an exercise, and you could do this exercise with your leaders as well, and say, all right, point 2, what do you think are the top 1, top 2, maybe top 3 things about the why, right? And start creating a conversation amongst your leadership team around why change, why transform. Because as you'd imagine, the first response a leader is going to make is, well, I want all of them. It's like, all right, well, we need to create focus. We need to create a clear sense of urgency. So you don't get all of them right away. We might ultimately get all of them, but where are we starting? Or what do we need in the next 3 to 6 months? So maybe focusing that conversation. And then what do you think happens when you got 6 different leaders in the room? Do you think they all pick the same thing? Or do you think they might pick 6 different things? And then won't it be important for us to have those 6 leaders discuss and try and debate and then come up with something clear? Because if 6 leaders go off and communicate 6 different goals, then that's not going to be focusing either. So we want to start a conversation right off the bat of getting into a clear, compelling reason for change, and even take these and turn them into something that might be a clear objective and clear measures of success. Like, all right, say we pick speed. Okay, how will we know? How are we going to measure that we have a speed increase? Right. So we want to get clear about the goalposts. So if you went to that link that's posted in the chat, you'll see that polev.com/velocity. You can. I want you to pick for your organization in your context. What do you think would be the most important business outcome out of this group? So we got an early vote for market responsiveness. Let's see what else potentially comes in as votes for your organization. So polev.com/velocity. You can just pull that up in a browser. All right, we got a predictability. Oh, so we must have had three votes at least for market responsiveness. All right, okay, here we go. So we've got lots of markets. I thought there was 1 vote on market responsiveness, just that everybody initially started off.
Wants that.
Okay. All right, so market responsiveness is our big winner so far, but we also have employee engagement, quality, predictability. And as you start to look at these, you probably get a sense that there's some dependency, right? And, it could be that we ultimately want market responsiveness, but in order to do that, we need to be able to have speed or deliver faster. But the reason why we don't have that is because we have quality issues. The reason why we don't have that is because we have employee engagement problems, right? We have too much turnover, right? Or things like that. So part of the conversation I encourage you to have as a leadership team is to say, all right, what is it that we ultimately want? And what is it that we need now? And those might be 2 different answers. And that's okay, right? To say, hey, we ultimately want customer satisfaction. We want to improve that. But right now we need to focus on quality. And so our ultimate goal, our vision of where we're going, what is it that we're trying to do now? So that's where we always want to start the first conversation to get to clear business outcome. Eric, what's our next one?
So the next question we get a lot is when? When should we do this? When should we start this? When is the right time? How do we know when it's the right time or the perfect time? And the answer is there really is no right time. There's never a good time. There's never an opportunity to stop what we're doing and make things right and then start over again. So we're constantly doing this on the fly. And odds are it's probably not the first time, you might have been going through a transformation. So as we look at the evolution of agile transformations and sort of agility in general, early on, it was a lot of grassroots stuff. So a few people, a few individuals, a few teams here and there started hearing about this different way of working and started doing things a little bit differently and getting some results. And that was great. And it got enough traction to where it could evolve from there. And then, it was a little bit more structured, team oriented, but it was still a very bottom up. It was still pretty grassroots, but there was at least a little more structure around it. And then from there, we started to get into like system level agility. And so if you're going from this team focused agility with some early structure around it, but not that evolved yet, you might have gotten to that point and had to do another transformation, right? So there might be this series of ongoing evolutions that are, you get to a point, you start to plateau, and it's time for another transformation. And so system level agility brought in this idea of the team of teams and aligning the teams and making sure that we can that we understand how to work together and manage our dependencies and things like that. And then from there, now we're seeing much more talk about business agility. Now there's this new wave of agile transformations that, this has clearly gone beyond IT. Lots of transformations are now talking about how do we change our business? Not just how do we change the way our development teams work, or our development and product teams have been doing it for a while, but how do we actually change the trajectory of where our business is going and the possible future we can create for our organization if we really think top down, side to side, like what does business agility really mean? And so really the answer to when is the right time to do this is now, because you're somewhere on this spectrum and it's an evolutionary scale. So, in some sense, just ripping off the Band-Aid and getting going, taking action is better than waiting for the mythical right time, which will never come. And one of the key things I think is really, are you, your organization, is your leadership team willing to prioritize the effort? And if you're willing to prioritize the effort that it's going to take to get there, then it's probably the right time. If you're not willing to prioritize the significant work that it's going to take, then you probably are in a scenario where you're going to struggle. You're going to have people pushing back. And, if you're just sort of doing it off the side of your desk, it's not going to have the kind of traction you need to push through those barriers to keep things going when, as we all know, it's a difficult journey. So I don't know, David, anything to add to that I might have missed around?
Well, Biana, asked the question, is the wrong time? And I think it's just the inverse of what you just said, which is, right, if there isn't enough sense of urgency because there's maybe so much other, firefighting of something else going on, or we've got other things that we're prioritizing. It doesn't work if you just say, oh, let's just layer this one on top, right, of all the other things that we're doing. Like, then it's not going to get enough attention, and it is a significant effort. So, but it does tie back to number one, right? We got to create the sense of urgency so that we all see that it's a clear priority. If we can't get to the clear why, or we don't have a strong why, then it won't be prioritized, right? So definitely, there are times when, there's just so much other things that are going on that are a priority that it's not the right time, because we can't assemble the people. People don't have enough time to dedicate to it. But I will definitely say that, like, if you're, we often will get should we wait for the next release? Should we wait for this? Well, if it's just your normal busy, right? Everybody's busy. If it's just your normal level of busy, well, then I wouldn't wait, right? Because you're never going to be calm. There's never calm. We're all twiddling our thumbs. What do we do? So, but if there's just other things that are just hair on fire priority that are going to outweigh this, then it's not necessarily the right time. So let's look at number 3. Number three is around who needs to be involved. And the reality is kind of everybody. And especially as Eric was hitting on, that we're moving into more of business agility, that we're starting to see the impact across the organization. This isn't just something that if you're a technology organization, it's not something that is self-contained within the tech, right? It's something that if you're a technology organization, well, you're going to need HR. It's going to impact finance. It's going to impact the business, your stakeholders. Everybody's going to be involved. If you're the marketing organization and you're doing an agile transformation, well, you're still going to need HR. You're going to need finance. You're going to need your downstream and upstream stakeholders that are involved in those processes. So it's going to impact lots of different people in the organization. And therefore, part of your job, if you're the kind of change champion trying to get this initiative going, is partial education, right? Educating all of these people on why they need to be involved, how they can help if they're involved, how they could be disruptive if they're not involved. And I heard somebody say the other day, we don't need leadership support, we need leadership participation, right? It's not that they're just there to, hey, yeah, y'all go do that agile thing. It's like, no, this is going to impact you, and it's going to change the questions you ask us of the organization, right? I tell leaders all the time, like, you got to stop asking, are you going to hit the date and what scope's going to be in it? And start asking things like, what are you learning? And how can I support you, right? How can I help you? What impediments organizationally can I remove for you so that you can be more successful as a team? So we've got to make sure we've got everybody kind of at the table, because we're going to impact them. So we've got to start educating them on the why and the benefits to them, what's in it for them. But we also have to educate them on how Agile is going to benefit the organization as a whole.
So this is like ripples in a pond, right? When you think about all the different areas that get impacted, it's hard to think of a place in your organization where something like agility, something that pervasive, isn't going to show up, right? So we've got this business input in terms of the product and services that we are producing for our customers. We've got these teams and teams of teams that are building things and creating these systems and delivering value. You've got like David said, the marketing team who's looking at all this and wondering, when are these things going to be out there? What exciting new things can we talk about? When are we going to be turning on new features for our customers? How do we overlay maybe our marketing plans on top of roadmaps, things like that? You've got HR wondering, how do we hire the right people that are going to fit into this environment? And you have all of these different systems that are, of course, evolving, and new technologies coming out and new methods for getting things built. And the teams are constantly in this learning pattern, this constant need to be upskilling and learning new things and pushing the boundaries. And of course, on the other end of that, the customer is expecting more and more, faster and faster. And so when you look at the ripples throughout the org, it's really hard to pick anywhere, even in a large enterprise, where you can't see, sort of, if you pull the thread, somebody who's being impacted by this.
And so one of the first things we start to look at is to say, all right, how do we align teams, optimize for delivering value? I think most enterprise organizations are sub-optimized for delivering value. I think they're optimized for output and now not outcome. And we talk, take that evolutionary agile back in the team-focused agile. We talked all the time about cross-functional feature teams. Well, now at the system level agility, we're talking about cross-functional systems of teams. And how do we build a cross-functional system of team that minimizes dependencies within the technology organization and minimizes dependencies to the other parts, like the business sides of the organization? And so that's something to start thinking about. Are we organized in a way to optimize. And so this will be, again, one of the early steps that we'll take working with the leadership around trying to see. It's almost like trying to read the matrix, right? Everybody knows they've got all these dependencies in all these different places, but we can't see it. And so we wanted to do something like this where we start mapping it all out so that we can figure out the right optimal design of our kind of team of teams, if you will. The fourth area is kind of what is impacted. And there's a couple areas here. The first thing we've got to recognize is just normal change, right? Change curve, or there's organizational disruption. And if we just kind of simply look at the Satir curve here, right? If we think about status quo, and then at the inflection point is where we introduce change. And it's a natural human reaction for us to react in a way where it causes chaos and resistance, because it creates fear, it creates trepidation, it creates uncertainty, right? If I go to you, Eric, and I say, Eric, last week you were in this role, next week you're going to be a Scrum Master. And you're like, all right, I'm excited about this new opportunity, but I'm not sure how to do it, right? So it's like, I knew how to be a hero in the old world. I don't know how to be a hero in the new world. And we as leaders, and especially the coaches that are on the call, like, we as change agents cause this curve on others, right? We introduce change. We love to change others. It's not necessarily something we like other people to do to us, but like, we love to optimize the system, but that also means we're causing change. And the main thing we talk about with leaders on this slide is to say, you've got to recognize you're about to put your people through this, and you've got to create safety for this learning journey that everybody's about to be on. So, and we got to get through it. Our goal as coaches, I learned, as a leader of a company, you're always striving for, like, what's our value proposition? How do we provide value? And, it's like, what's the value of a coach? A coach helps people, they guide, they educate. But at the end of the day, what I realized, the value of a coach is to accelerate people through this learning, this kind of change curve, this learning journey, right? Accelerate people through and reduce the risk of how deep they go. Create safety and support. And that's what we're trying to do, is get people through this learning journey. And the reality, like we talked about evolutionary agility, you really have, if you think about this as sometimes we call it a J curve, you think about it, you really have a series of a bunch of different J curves, right? There's not just one change that's happening, right? If every 2 weeks we're introducing something new out of a retro, we're causing another little curve. And ideally, there'd be a bunch of little small ones as opposed to one humongous one. But there is an organizational lift that has a heavier kind of curve to it. So that's the first thing we've got to recognize, is that we're going through this shift, this change, and it's going to be disruptive, and we've got to create support for that.
Yeah, and to just add to that, I think reinforcing with leadership that this is a culture shift at its heart, and that, back to what David said earlier, that support is different from participation. And so with coaching and with leadership participation, you can accelerate out of there further. Especially when we look at how the organization and the teams are impacted by this change. So you've got this change curve happening both at the org level, as well as system and team. So as we look at the organization, right, the leaders are thinking, okay, well, we have all these things going on. We're investing all this money in trying to make this transformation. We're trying to decide on what are the right investments to be making. We've got these, transformation coaches telling us we need to limit our WIP. We want to do all the things, but we're being told that we can't do all the things. So that creates a lot of friction and, internal stress with them. So they're going through that curve. You've also got at the system layer, those folks who are aligning or realigning or finding whatever that new alignment looks like to be delivering on the products and services that they produce. And trying to understand how their work flows and managing all of those different dependencies and interlocks that are happening, and trying to understand who are the right people to be pulling in. If we're doing, say, a big room planning event, do we need marketing there? Do we need some attorneys there? Do we have compliance people? Like whatever that might look like. And so it creates this new, again, change for those folks. If you've got people coming in from the business side or elsewhere in the organization that have never been part of this, they're experiencing that change, and that difficulty is that, hey, we're asking you to think and act differently. And of course, the natural reaction is, chaos, resistance, whatever. People push back. And then, of course, at the team level is the most obvious. We're asking them to work differently together, to stop thinking so much in, and this goes up and down, in product terms or in project terms, to move more toward a product type of mentality and bringing the work to the team and persistent teams and all of those kind of things. It's really, it's a major cultural shift and requires the senior leadership to be really deeply engaged in that, because they're the only ones that can make that happen. And so the kind of positive benefits that you get and the level of engagement that it takes, it won't happen by accident. And the people at the team level can't make it happen. That's why we see this evolution to where we are with business agility today, is because there's a recognition that this thing is pervasive. We do want to change our organization, but it doesn't happen by accident. We need that top-down engagement as well.
So the other shift that that's really important is what we think about from a leadership shift. And we talk often about leaders need to lead the change. We as an Agile community have done leaders a disservice. For years, decades even, we told leaders all the things that they can't do anymore, right? It's like, you can't come to retros, you can't task your team anymore, you don't even get to set their priorities. Thank you, you're not invited in the room, right? And we did that for decades. And what we didn't do was tell leaders what their new role was. We didn't do a good job of educating on, all right, what's the value of the leader now? And I kind of outlined 4 things here around inspiring kind of with purpose and helping make sure that teams can connect their work back to an overall goal in partnership with product. But creating focus for the teams, the organization, creating, more and more I'm understanding that, the job of a leader is to create the environment and the container for people and teams to thrive. And that means maintaining more of a system agility mindset and thinking across the organization. So leaders have to now develop new skills around, I got to do more collaboration with my peers to optimize the whole system while the teams are trying to operate within the system. So the leaders are now focused on that system. And in order to enable what we call decision agility, it used to be all communication flowed up, all data flowed up, and leaders up here would analyze it and make decisions, and decisions would flow down. Anybody have an organization where you're still doing data heavy status reports up leadership chain? That's still accomplishing that old goal. I'm putting all the data up so that these people can make decisions, right? As opposed to enabling decision agility, which is saying folks are empowered, but in order to enable decision agility, we need bi-directional communication. Not only does information need to flow up, but information needs to flow down, not just decisions flowing down, but information in terms of strategy, direction, the data around what's happening organizationally, so that people are informed and can make decisions closest to where the problems are. So that becomes a different skill. As leaders, I now need to become collaborators across the system with other leaders. How many times do you just see leaders that all they're worried about is managing their group, and blaming everybody else, right? Like, just do what I need to get my work done, as opposed to we're all part of the same team trying to deliver value to the organization. So it's the leadership shift is one of the most critical shifts that has to happen in a transformation, and we need to start getting our leaders ready for that in our preparing for a transformation, and we need to acknowledge that that's part of it. I don't know how many times the sales hotline rings and it's like, hey, leader, so and so is like, hey, can you come train my teams because we need to do Agile? Go train them. What about you? No, I'm good. I understand Agile. Those people need training. It's not about the teams. The teams is actually the easy part anymore, right? The leaders in that shift is a really critical part.
Yeah. So how do we transition that? How do we find the right people to lead that change? Are the senior leaders, we're going to tell them now, okay, your new role is to again make all those decisions? Well, no. I mean, they're part of it. They need to understand their role shift. But one of the things that we do is create an Agile leadership team. And so an Agile leadership team can help to, it can be a diverse, it's a small team. It's like Scrum team size, but it represents some diversity. So it's not just senior leaders. It's a mix of people at different levels with different perspectives to help understand what the needs are at the different areas in the organization. But this has to be a group who is truly empowered to make decisions. So this isn't a figurehead group that says, hey, we'll collect the data for you in the guise of something else and then give it to you, leader, so you can make decisions. These are people who are understanding the journey that we're on, the goals that we're trying to achieve. So they should understand the business outcomes that we're after, and are the people who are trying to create that environment to make the decisions, to give the people the information they need, so people are making local decisions around how to move the transformation forward. So we've got this coalition of they're powerful leaders. They're powerful in that they actually can make decisions. They can affect real change. They don't have to go ask may I for everything. So it's not an approval process. They are seeing what's going on. They're creating feedback loops in the organization. They've got diversity on the team. So they're pulling in information from different areas and they're driving the change. They're also drinking their own champagne, right? So they're acting as an Agile team. They are working the way, modeling the behavior that they are expecting others to do. So that, the last thing you want is teams going, hey, you guys are telling us to do all this stuff, putting all this change on us, but we see you doing meetings all the same way you've always done them. You're the way that you operate and make decisions. It's all the same. You just call yourself an ALT instead of whatever it was before. That undermines their trust in the process. But when they see the Agile leadership team leading by example and modeling the behavior, not only does it build trust, but it also helps with the folks who will inevitably be thinking, we don't need to do Agile here. This doesn't work for us. Here's why we shouldn't be doing this. We've been doing these things for years successfully. Why should we be doing that? It makes it a lot harder for them to they might be thinking those thoughts, but to make those sort of claims is really hard when you see this leadership team who is embracing all of the things that they're asking you to do, right? They're walking the walk. So some of the responsibilities are listed there. So common vision. So we need the Agile leadership team to be helping to create this common vision and communicate that out. Like, why are we doing this? Where are we going? Why is this so important? Where's that sense of urgency that's driving us, that's preventing us from, hey, wait, now's not the right time. Maybe in 3 months we could do this. So it's this constant over communication through different various channels, trying to develop quick wins with things. So, you got to, Agile leadership team should be helping the coaches find an area where we can go and get some wins, not an area that's so easy that detractors would look at that and go, oh yeah, of course they could do it over there. That group's been doing that since day one. So, things are easy over there. They're not in a very complex environment. But we also don't want to go work somewhere where it's so difficult that change is almost impossible off the bat, right? We need some sort of middle ground where it's hard enough that the Agile leadership team can show, okay, here was an area that needed to make improvement. It wasn't an easy area to do it, and here's the improvements that have been made. They're removing obstacles on a regular basis. So organizational impediments and the friction that teams are identifying in their retrospectives and through different feedback loops, those need to be removed, right? And they need to be visibly removed. And the ALT needs to communicate back to the teams. We heard you. You said that this was a problem. Here's what we've done to remove it. Here's the result. Now go see if that helps. Does it help with the system or not? And then ultimately that leads to culture change. So when people see others walking the walk, they see results, they see that when you say you're going to go help fix and change something and that you're part of that and that happens, it starts to engender this positive reinforcement.
So you've got this ALT, which is kind of like your change agents in the organization. And the other thing to think about is, all right, where are we going to get guidance from? Because for the organization, while there's probably different people, these days, everybody you hire in tech has some kind of agile experience, but they're all different. And there could be a lot of baggage with their previous agile experience. And so the question is, do you have people inside of the organization who can guide the transformation because they've been there, done it before? Or is that something that you need to seek out and bring in help, right? Because it's one of these things, it's easy, simple, hard to master, right? Doing Agile, right? The Scrum guide's 18 pages, but being really good at Scrum. And so something to think about is where's that help going to come from? And there's kind of 4 key options that we see a lot out there. It could be, all right, we're going to try and do things ourselves, which is, the cheapest option and creates the most self-sufficiency because it's, hey, we're going to have to figure it out. But the question is, does it add risk and does it delay that time through that trough, like that change curve? Or are we going to get consulting help? And what are those different options that if you look across the top, right, factoring in, these are factors to think about: cost, our agile transformation experience. Is there a clear approach on how that's going to happen? Is it creating self-sufficiency? What's the time frame to get there? What's the long-term success? So think about the factors and the options of ways that you can engage support in your agile transformation. Number 6, Eric, how do we manage the change?
How can you manage it? Tough to do. So what we have done with Path to Agility is to provide a framework that we've had a lot of success with, and this starts with the business outcomes. Again, because it's easy to start with practices. That's the most obvious thing that you see happening, and it's a place where a lot of people start. Well, let's train on Scrum and let's start doing Scrum. But why? What's the result? So back to our earlier discussion around starting with why. So what matters most? The business outcomes. And those business outcomes, they lead to that why dictates the agile outcomes that we're trying to achieve. And that enables us to start to build these agile capabilities, these internal capabilities throughout the organization. And it's those capabilities that then link up with the practices. So from that top-down approach, you start with, okay, what are the business outcomes that we're trying to achieve? Back to those, the 9 yellow cards that David talked about. If you had different leaders in a room, which ones would they pick? Assuming they've got clear direction. Hey, these are the 2 business outcomes. This is why we need to change. what are the internal capabilities that we need to build, and what practices will actually help us build those capabilities. So the practices enable our internal capabilities, which gives us more long-term growth and options and sustainability. We start seeing agile outcomes, so we can start to manage how are we progressing. Are we moving in the right direction? Are we leading toward these business outcomes? And do we have a level of sustainability in the organization that we can actually see and measure? And how do we identify areas where we can maintain focus? So there's a lot of interrelatedness. Again, these are like ripples in a pond. So as you're talking about outcomes and capabilities, it's never a simple one-to-one, but these things are all linked in a meaningful way in Path to Agility back to the business outcomes. And one of the, I think on the next slide, well, I'll let you talk to this one, David, because I think this really is a great view for how to manage the change. So when we're looking at this view and looking at these capabilities, outcomes.
Yeah. And I think with what Eric was highlighting there, too often, if I kind of go back to this story, too often it's, all right, we want speed, and then we go apply SAFe, right? Or Scrum or Kanban, or, and we just like try and implement all the things. And I think that's actually the number one failure pattern of agile transformations today is, people that are just trying to implement all the things in the picture. And so often we see agile transformations are only focused on the agile practices. It's great if you add the business outcomes, but the question is, how do I connect the two? And so that's what we've tried to do with Path to Agility, is to connect that. We've got 9 business outcomes, 26 agile outcomes, 85 capabilities in the framework to start connecting these pieces so that you can identify, like, where are we and where do we need to go? And so this overview map that we see here is what we call the 26 agile outcomes that have a correlation to the business outcomes. And one of the things that you can do is assess your current state. And so imagine this in a heat map, red, yellow, green. And that helps you identify, in order for you to identify the steps you need to take next, you need to know where you are. And that's what we're trying to do with this map, is to show there is dependency. There is that relationship of org, system, and team, as Eric highlighted earlier. We also have on here kind of these 5 stages that we see transformations progress through: align, learn, predict, accelerate, adapt. And you see these arrows, right? And these arrows are kind of showing that, like, ultimately we might want ability to focus, but in order to get that, we have a dependency on cross-team coordination, which has a dependency on teams aligned to value, which has a dependency all the way back to compelling purpose, which is what we started with today. So the key here is you've got to get clear, even if you're using Path to Agility or not. Don't just jump right into the practices. Start with your business outcomes and then identify, all right, what capabilities do we need in the organization in order to achieve that outcome? And then figure out what's the minimal amount of practice or new change from a process perspective. What's the minimal amount of practice you could apply to achieve that capability? Maybe, Dean Leffingwell would be the first person to say, you don't implement everything in SAFe, right? The goal is not to do everything in the picture. The goal is to figure out the parts that are going to make sense for you. There are some critical components, but it's not that everything you got to do exactly the way it's written there.
Well, and thinking back to market responsiveness, that everybody, loved that in the poll, right? That's what everybody wants, but you can't just jump to that, right? If you don't have teams aligned and you don't have quality and some of these other things, how can you possibly have market responsiveness? And so being able to look at these and map these out and see the progression of are we accomplishing these things in a sustainable way really helps you move toward the ultimate outcomes that you're trying to accomplish.
And lastly, where do you start? So do we do this everywhere at once? Is that the best way? Big bang, I got a 1,000-person organization, just like, let's change everybody at once. If you have an appetite for it, maybe, but
yeah. but that might not go so well. Doing
Yeah.
all the things typically doesn't go well, right? So how do you thread that needle and figure out like, okay, where's a logical place to start, and how do we understand that? So looking at like, do you have a willing business partner, right? So do you have if it's a product team that is willing to engage? Do you have leaders who are looking at the bigger strategic investments that are being made, who are willing to be actively engaged with the teams that are building them and delivering those kind of capabilities in a way where we can get past the throwing stuff over the wall? We want to really engage. We want to learn fast. We want to cut down the cycle time and the feedback loops. Do you have areas where you can improve? Again, like, you don't want to go bang your head against a brick wall. You need to find somewhere where improvement's possible. Now, you could argue improvement's possible anywhere in the organization, but again, you want to get some wins. You want to start to build some momentum and get some traction before you go and tackle the nearly impossible problem that everybody's been trying to solve for the last decade. That might not be the place to start. Willing leadership. Are they engaged? Are they participating? Do they show up to key events and share insights around what's happening in the market, or with what was delivered last quarter, how that might have been driving sales? And are they thanking the teams? And are they ever doing Gemba walks and understanding what's really happening? Do they understand what change they're asking their team members to go through, and are they going through it themselves? Is there urgency? Of course, like we've got to have a reason to go through this difficult thing. If there's no sense of urgency, if we have forever to do this, then it'll take forever. So we need some level of urgency, and we want to have a learning opportunity, right? We want to be able to come away from this and say, okay, we invested a certain amount of time, money, and energy into doing this. What did we learn as an organization, so that we can leverage that learning going forward to propel the next thing that we need to learn from, and keep creating this cycle. So if you can find somewhere where there's this intersection point of all of these, then you probably have a really good candidate for an area to sort of put a container around it where you can say, this is the scope of our effort, and we recognize that there's things outside of there that also need to change, but that's not what, we're not going to try and do that all at once and boil the ocean.
Yeah, I mean, and if you had 100-person organization, sure, you could let's just do it. But this is what is this meetup called? The scale Denver at scale meetup, right? So we're talking big companies, and the reality is, some of our clients that have had 5,000 people, 10,000 people in just their technology group, you can't change it all at once. You've got to figure out the wave, kind of a wave approach of, all right, where are we going to start? What are we going to learn from that's going to help inform the next wave, that's going to help inform the next wave, back to that evolutionary approach. And, you don't want to pick somewhere that's just too easy, where everybody in the organization is like, of course that worked in the mobile team, right? Like, that's easy. We're the real systems back here, right? But you also don't want to pick something that's totally, at odds. Let's start with the COBOL systems, right? Like, that's probably not the best place to start either. So you got to pick somewhere where we're going to have enough learning, and it's going to prove something to the organization that will inform and create momentum for the next one. And you do want to stack the deck a little bit, in the sense that I'm not going to go somewhere where I don't have some, ideally I'd go somewhere where there's some great leaders that are already excited about this opportunity, creating excitement in their organization, where there's a willing business partner. But it's going to learn something. It's going to prove something. I also don't encourage you to just choose one place, right? Don't start and just say, all right, we're going to just try this in one place, because who knows what could happen that could blow something up, right? Like, say it's totally unrelated to the Agile transformation, but they have some production type, fire thing that happens that just totally derails the transformation, or that leader leaves the organization, right? Like something that's disruptive, and now all your eggs are in one basket. So choose a couple things, and that'll also inform more learning, right? Like, all right, we're going to do it in these 2 places or these 3 places, and that's going to help inform where we go from here. All right, so we're about to move into some Q&A. Those were our 7 things here, but as we're queuing up, if you've got any questions and want to type them in the chat, otherwise we'll ask to see if there's any questions. If you're interested in the slides and some, we just actually did a webinar that we recorded around Southwest Airlines Agile transformation using Path to Agility. It was a safe Agile transformation at scale as well. We can send that information to you as well. If you are interested in that, just go ahead and in the Poll EV site, you can just post drop your email address in there. What questions can we answer for folks?
Yeah, David and Eric, can I ask you a question now?
Yes.
It was awesome, fantastic presentation, created a lot of intellectual curiosity. Thanks for that. My question to you is, assume we are doing a product development and there is a product release strategy, bits and pieces, small chunks releasing into the market.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think the role of agile teams in understanding and implementing the go-to-market strategy? Look at go-to-market strategy of the product. What every agile team member at a team level, how do you measure? What are the metrics? How do you link the team members in terms of implementing the go-to-market strategy week by week or things like that?
Yeah. So I'll take an attempt, and Eric, if there's anything you want to add. I think part of that is what level of kind of maturity or capability the organization has. If I was all the way out to the right in what we call the adapt stage, and let me paint a picture of that organization, an organization where we have our teams tightly aligned with the product and what they're delivering in the market, and there's an empowerment in such a way that, it's like the Spotify team that owns search, and that's all they do, and that's what they're focused on, and they know what's happening there and those pieces. Well, then they can be very clued in to their personas, to the users, to the market of what they're trying to do. And so that what we see over there on the right, the market agility, accelerated product learning, that whole unit from technology through business is all working together in conjunction to solve those problems. And in that world, right, at that level of maturity, that might be all together and the team is involved in that. Now, if we're at an earlier stage of capability, right, we've got teams that are doing Scrum, we might have good DevOps practices, so we're able to release continuously, but and so the team might be further along in like predict, accelerate, but organizationally, we're not there yet, right? And in that kind of world, then there's still more of a separation of responsibilities in that earlier stage kind of level of maturity, that then the team's maybe not being invited to the table in that conversation, right? And so I think we just got to recognize sometimes of like, where are we as an organization? And is that something that we can pull off? Are we ready for? Is that part of our DNA? Is that part of our structure? Are leaders empowering? And other times we're not there. We're not at that level. We're not ready for that. And that's okay, right? The question is, what's the next step to take in order to start getting closer to that, if something like market responsiveness is our ultimate goal? Because in order to get to market responsiveness, it can't go up the hierarchy chain and down the hierarchy chain every time we need to make a decision.
Yeah, I agree with all that, and I would add that creating though tight feedback loops. So even if we're on the right hand side and we have a very mature organization, then I would assume that we have really tight collaboration between the development teams who are pushing things out. You know, if there's a mature CI/CD pipeline in place and they're pushing out these little packets, little features and things on a continuous basis, that they are demoing those things, and they're probably getting feedback from their customers, and they're building metrics and information flows around those really tight feedback loops, getting them much more closer to the customer. And if we're earlier on in our maturity, the metrics probably are more around, you know, traditional things like cycle times and lead time and throughput and things like that, and less tightly coupled with what the customers are actually getting. But I would still want to push the boundaries and say, bring more engagement and have, you know, try to create those feedback loops with whether that's the product team or whatever. So be demoing, be looking at that stuff, and be pushing the boundaries to create good conversations and see, you know, are the teams asking really good questions, insightful questions, and how do they deal with the information that you are giving with them, and start to build some trust to move them closer to that level of awareness of what's really happening in the weeds of a go-to-market strategy.
Other questions?
Thanks a lot. Makes sense to me. Thank you.
You're welcome.
No, anybody else? Not, I'll turn it back over to Sally and Randy. I think that's it.